right. Welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm Cahill. That's Ellis. That's Peter. We run the writing centers at Fordham University, and this is a short writing series on tips for new writers, old writers, and just conversations about writing in general, to be used either in supplementation for a comp class or just in general for your own edification. Today we're going to be talking about setting up a writing space, both physically and mentally, what that involves, things that work for us, things that might work for you. So we're going to go through today and go over our different styles, and each person is going to give us 5 tips about what works for them in writing.
I'll start. My first tip is just to experiment. Try different setups until you can determine what works best for you in a writing space. There's a lot of different factors to take into consideration when you're trying to think of how you're going to set up your writing space. You might want to try experimenting with lighting. Some people prefer natural light to artificial light. I personally prefer artificial light. There's noise level. Some people like kind of a dull roar or soft music. Some people like total silence. There's also your physical position where you're writing in the house, your location, what time of day you like to write best. Whatever it might be, all of these factors kind of go into how you might set up your writing space. And your ideal working conditions are not going to be the same as someone else's. So experiment.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip, just because I've found in my own career, I write very differently from everyone else. So I am not like a space-driven writer. I am very much so I go out into the world and write if I can, whenever I can.
I find that I am a space-driven writer, and I very much like the idea of, some assignments I want silence. I don't want a window nearby. I'm just scribbling furiously. And other assignments, I'd rather be out. There'd be natural light. There'd be ambient noise. Yeah, and so to Ellis's point, find what works for you, and what works in the morning may not work in the evening. What works for a comp paper may not work for a history paper. Yeah, explore.
So it's going to really vary depending on the assignment, depending on what works for you and the time of day that you're most alert. Pay attention to how your focus changes throughout the day, and how your energy changes. My second tip is set firm boundaries with roommates and housemates and family members about when those times are. When you're most alert and energetic, then you're going to want to be the most productive. So try to set really firm boundaries with the people that you live with about when you can and cannot be disturbed. This is hard. This is a hard one for me. Having an office door helps. Not everyone has an office door. But sometimes if you don't have a really private space to write, having a special set of headphones that you wear when you are not to be disturbed can be a great visual cue to the people in your household that, this is Ellis's private writing time. This is when they're not going to be disturbed. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those incredibly lucky people that happens to live alone in New York City, so that is not an issue for me.
Yeah, if you live alone, then I think if you live alone, I think it's just about avoiding distraction as much as possible. That was my real problem when I lived alone. Now I live with people, and I have to be very clear about when I'm in writing mode. I even have a little "do not disturb" sign, like in hotels, that I hang on my door.
Good move with that one.
My next tip is something that works really well for me and might have varying mileage for different people who have different preferences. It's to keep your area really tidy. I do regular, like multiple times a day, just small sweeps of the desk area to clear away any cups or stray papers or books that have accumulated over the course of the day as I've been working. So this is a little bit related to my first point where, you know, many people will have different tolerances for clutter, but I like my desk very clear. The only thing that's on it right now is a pen cup, a little like statue that I like to stare at when I write, and a pile of books that I'm currently working with. So I like to keep it very clear. And to do that, I recommend keeping it tidy by doing like very regular small sweeps of your writing space. Do you guys do anything like that? Do you tidy as you go much, or do you kind of let things accumulate and then do a big clean, or do you not clean at all?
What do I do? I think I let things accumulate. I find that this happens with both tabs, right? When you're working on a research paper, you know, you have 35 tabs open, and then I find that that's mirrored in the real world. Yeah, cups, books, papers. And so I think it's really gratifying to let it all accumulate. And then when you're moving on to the next project, then you purge, right? You clean everything up to make it messy again for the next project. So I feel like mid project, I don't mind clutter, but in between projects, cleanliness must occur.
I get that. I'm actually, cleanliness, sure. Clean space, that's great. An uncluttered space, ooh, no. I will always have like bits of writing just around. I've got here a piece of mail that I've just started writing some poetry on that will eventually be turned into something. And so that's just sitting on my desk because eventually I'll come back to it. So it depends on largely what it is I'm doing. If I'm doing academic writing, it'll happen in one book. But if it's some sort of poetry or creative writing, it happens all over the place on small sheets of paper everywhere. And that's just my own process.
My fourth tip is that creating a workspace that works for you is also an investment in your health. And this could be something really small, like putting your laptop up on a pile of books so you're not so hunched over. It could be something that's, you know, kind of medium scale, like buying an extra pillow for your back or your neck. Or it could be something larger, like buying a new desk chair, right? And so just tweaking your workspace in little ways that make you physically more comfortable and more active can really help you concentrate and help you not feel like writing is such a physically demanding chore, because it is physical. So you could also do other small things like put blue light filters on your screen devices, take lots of breaks to walk around. I like to stand up and walk around about every 20-25 minutes, just to kind of putter around a little bit, do a little cleaning, maybe get a cup of water or a cup of tea.
That all sounds very, very practical for getting lots done. I can't imagine sitting for hours and hours and hours without getting up and going to do something. And I think it took me a while to realize that that's not procrastination. That's just like a little tiny reset that's so necessary for the next 20 minutes of work.
Yeah, and you're still thinking when you're getting up and walking around a little bit. You're still writing in a sense, like you're still going over that same topic in your mind. And some of my best ideas happen when I'm not actually physically sitting at the desk, but actually moving around a little bit, or exercising in between writing jags.
Oh, sorry, was that did you have one more, or was that your last one?
My fifth tip is to make your space both aesthetic and functional. So add items to your space that you really like, that make you happy. Try not to make it completely bare bones, even if it's just adding, like, you know, a little toy or a little statue or a piece of art that you like. You can see from my office that I really live by this. housemates. I definitely surround my writing space with things that make me happy, things that bring me joy, and also not sacrificing any function for that. So I really recommend like having your writing space be a place that you want to be in one way or another.
I actually 100% agree with that. And I see you've got your Charmander in the background. And
My
I
little
think,
buddy.
you know, if that makes the job easier or makes you want to do it, 100%. I've got random stuff all over my little writing space. So it's just nice to have something, a space that you can kind of like feel proud of, but then it also becomes your writing space, but also your office. Might not be that great for students right now at Fordham, where your own space is going to be limited, but even just something that you can set out and have that you enjoy, that does bring you some sort of joy.
I mean, it can be as simple as a tiny stuffed Charmander, or you know, a single like print from an artist that you really like that you just carry around with you and hang on the wall wherever you're working that day. It could be stickers on your laptop. You know, if your writing space is your laptop, then that's what you can decorate. This does not need to be, you know, a complete overhaul of your house or your bedroom. It can be small changes that you make that just add a feeling of comfort and home and happiness to your writing space, even if that writing space is very small or very portable or very simple. Peter, do you do anything like that? Or do you prefer a starker space?
I just realized that this guy sort of sits on the table nearby. I hadn't consciously put it together, but I think whenever I'm working in this space, this little fella is looking over me. So it's somewhat like your Charmander there.
All right.
Good to have a little buddy.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, why don't you take it away with your 5 tips?
Sure. My first tip that I think works for me and it may work for others has to do with what Ellis was saying regarding a portable workspace. I find that I really have a hard time working in one space for hours on end. And so I like to break the day up into 3 or 4 parts. And so before COVID, this was at home and then a cafe and then another cafe and then a park. Since COVID has occurred, this is now, you know, one writing session at a desk, the next one outside, the next at the kitchen table. I find just intentionally moving from space to space works quite well for me, and maybe even more necessary during COVID, where just moving and going anywhere remotely new can feel liberating.
Yeah, I used to do that a lot when I lived in the city. I called it cafe hopping, like bar hopping, but just going from coffee shop to coffee shop. And sometimes even now I will like go downstairs and work in the kitchen for a little while and then move upstairs to my office. And that can be a good way of splitting up the day if you're working on many different projects. You know, you work in the living room on your comp project, but you work in your bedroom for, you know, your other papers. Like that could be a way to split up the day.
Yeah, I actually do something very similar, is that I set up the writing stages based off of space. So if I'm doing research and reading, I'll be in one place. And if I'm doing, you know, fine editing and proofing and revising, it'll be somewhere else.
I may steal this, Kyle. My second tip has to do with not only the space, but the sound, or the soundscape in which you're writing. And so as you're writing, of course, you'll realize what works for you, right? Whether you need complete silence, whether ambient noise, whether instrumental music. I think this is quite important to sort of intentionally think about this. I feel like unless you intentionally sort of wrap your head around this, you might be frustrated, right? You might be working and there's ambient noise outside your window and you don't realize that it's distracting you. So whether it's noise canceling headphones or, you know, a great soundtrack, I really like writing to soundtracks. I wrote my master's thesis to Interstellar, for sure, Hans Zimmer. And then I suppose something that might be good for Fordham students, like all of us, is there is the student deal for Spotify. So if you look up like Spotify student discount, you can get the premium Spotify with Hulu and Showtime for all of those post-paper binge sessions for $5 a month, which is pretty good in terms of getting your soundscape ready to go.
I didn't know about that. I've been paying extra for Spotify this entire time, so I feel a little silly.
Yeah, something that I absolutely love, and that I learned from my students more than anything else, is chill hop anime beats to relax to, or whatever that YouTube channel is. We'll put a link to it below, but you probably already know what it is.
Yeah,
I don't. I have a Spotify playlist that I listen to every time I write. That is just a lot of. It's also a lot of soundtracks, actually. I find that they work really well, although I'm partial to the Lord of the Rings soundtracks.
Kyle, that chill hop playlist is so good. I mean, the animated videos are so whimsical, and it's lovely to have a little bit of like marvelous fun, sort of a little character hanging out there while you're writing, especially when it's like 2 a.m. and you're feeling demoralized because you're still churning through a paper. Can't recommend it highly enough.
It totally sets the mood and the mode.
Yeah. My third tip is somewhat related. I think very much about what else is open on my laptop or my tablet as part of my space, right? And so I'm very aware that if I have Netflix and Facebook and CNN open, right, that I'm probably not serving whatever project I'm working on. And so I try to be intentional about those tabs. I would be a bad writing center tutor unless I didn't shamelessly plug thesaurus.com here is always open, and I highly recommend keeping it always open. And then even as a writing center tutor, I always have the website for the OWL at Purdue open. These are other links we can include below. Just a great reminder, am I doing this MLA citation correctly? Am I using this punctuation correctly? Brilliant. Just quick reminder. My fourth and fifth tips we've sort of touched upon a little bit, but we talked a moment ago about having like designated spaces for working on this type of assignment or for not working on an assignment at all. And again, I think especially during COVID, that's crucial to have really intentional workspaces and then like me spaces. So I know many people have a sort of a policy, right? Like no, in their bedroom, maybe like no work, right? Or no, the laptop is only for Netflix in your bedroom. And you're not doing an intense research project. And then you would want the opposite to be true. So maybe at your workspace, you're not playing video games, or you're not, just sort of idling there. Sort of keeping that divide hard and fast might work for you.
Yeah, I definitely have that divide between my bedroom and my and really the rest of the house, which I tend to work not just in my office but also downstairs. So yeah, I do tend to limit the bedroom space to just like relaxation, reading, Netflix, that kind of fun stuff.
I am 100% with you. I have a door stays closed. It keeps away the kitchen and the bedroom, which are like the two big draws, right? Because I can always get up and make another cup of tea. And that's as much of, a mind suck as anything else.
This makes sense. My final tip isn't so much a tip, more of just a suggestion. I know something that works for me is that I'll look up the workspaces of people that I admire, right? Your favorite artists, your favorite filmmakers, your favorite writers. It's chances are someone has written a piece somewhere if they have a setup that really works for them. And some of them are quite extreme, right? Like Jonathan Franzen is famous for working in a blank room with a laptop that does not have an internet connection. And that's how he churns out his stuff. Other writers are famous for only working in super cold spaces, or only working outside, or only working in cafes. But if you go down the rabbit hole and sort of Google your favorite person and their space, chances are there might be some inspiration there for you.
Yeah, Stephen King calls his writing space his far-seeing place, which I love. Because he writes in like a little basement room, or he was when he was writing On Writing, which is his book about writing craft. And I like the idea that, wherever you are, whatever space works for you personally, it can be your far-seeing place as well.
I love that.
I absolutely love that. One of my favorite writing stories is that Neil Gaiman, when he finished American Gods, couldn't do it in America. He needed to not be in the country. So he had to be in a small cottage away from the rest of the world, out on the Irish coast. And that was when he finally understood what his story about America was about, was when he wasn't there. So the physical distance can help with that kind of stuff. All right. Well, thank you for your 5 tips. I'm going to jump into mine. And the first one is very much so a me thing, but it's something that I feel that a lot of students might get use out of now that we're all Zooming and on technology all the time. And that is to go analog. Just forget the laptop, forget, webcams, forget social media, and just pick up a pen and paper. And to me, that helps for a number of reasons. It returns the physicality of writing to your hand, which is something that, when we first learned how to write, it was with our hands, not necessarily typing. Though maybe times are different now, and some people learned how to first write with a keyboard. But it also builds in a step of revision into your writing process. So when you have your thoughts written out on a paper, you can cross things out, you can move things around, but you're eventually going to have to turn that into a computer document anyway. So that builds in your first step of revision, your first real second try on whatever it is you're working on, and that lets you bring out whatever conclusions you made. Oftentimes when we're writing, we're working towards some sort of larger idea, and we don't really know what it was important until we reach the end. So we're going to need to pull things back from the ending to the start anyway. So might as well just do that physically with a piece of paper when we transfer it to a computer. What do you think?
Yeah, I do a lot of my initial brainstorming in notebooks, and I find that oftentimes if I'm stuck, if I am trying to write on my computer and it's just not working, I can't think of the right ideas, then returning to a pen and paper is really, really helpful. For big writing projects, I even sometimes set aside a specific notebook or a section in a notebook for that particular writing project, so that if I need to find my notes about, my research or any brainstorming that I did about my thesis, then I can always just turn back to that specific notebook or section in a notebook.
And I think that makes sense, and especially notebooks. Yeah, I'm a big fan of notebooks, just for jotting the thing down. And I also know that people, there are people who even in 2020 mostly write sort of long form by hand, and then if they have someone else type it up, right? I know Harold Bloom at Yale was famous for this, and Henry Kissinger, who's still with us, is famous for this. And they think in whole paragraphs. They think in whole sentences, completely constructed, punctuated paragraphs, which is really cool. And that's hard for any of us to do, but there is a sense that if you are writing it out by hand, you're thinking in a little bit of a longer form, I feel like, which can only serve your writing.
All right. My second tip is, we kind of touched on this before, set a time limit. I am not a fan of these all-night writing stretches that our students often do, that I was guilty of in undergrad, and to be honest, in my master's program as well. And, writing is a lot like going to the gym. And if you started at the gym lifting 400 pounds or trying to run a marathon, you're just going to end up hurting yourself and leaving yourself out of the gym for the next, half a year. if we write in small stretches and start training ourselves up, I find that that makes it not only more bearable, but it starts getting us to enjoy the process a lot more, like you enjoy eventually going to the gym. Plus,
Yeah,
plus with these sort of like 20-minute bursts, if you do that and then do something else, it's not like all the thoughts left your head. You're still going to be thinking about them as you're doing other things. So you can go to the actual gym, or you can, you know, do your laundry and take care of other chores, come back to the writing in an hour, and all the thoughts will have matured a little bit. You'll have worked things out, and when they come onto the page, they'll be a little bit tighter.
yeah. Some people even set timers on their phones to, you know, have those 20-minute bursts, be really productive, and then when the timer dings, you can get up and do whatever for 5 or 10 minutes, and then come back, write for 20 minutes, and so on and so forth. There are different apps for Pomodoro timers on your phone that you can get for the for those specific timers, or you can just use your clock app.
All right. Point number 3 is sort of tied into that, and that is be physical. Writing can create a lot of nervous energy in the body, and I find that just going for a run, or, you know, doing yoga or something else before we sit down to write kills off a lot of that nervous energy. So that's more of a personal thing. I don't know. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, yeah, there's no better feeling than you've just sort of churned out a 3-page draft of something, and you've just poured yourself onto the page, and you know you've had 19 cups of coffee, and you just need to go move. Yeah, the what's on the page will make so much more sense to you after you go for a little jog and come back.
Yeah, I mean, and exercise also helps to create endorphins. It helps you feel like you've accomplished something, and I mean, you have accomplished something, right? So having that feeling when you're starting out to sit down and write can actually be very inspiring and very helpful. So that's a great tip as well.
All right. Tip number 4, and this is something that kind of you end up learning in the profession if you're constantly writing, and that is always be writing. That is at every single stage of whatever process it is that you're doing, write. So when you start researching a project, start jotting down your notes as you're coming across new materials. Write whole paragraphs. Just kind of constantly be your thoughts alongside whatever thoughts you're engaging with. That'll help you kind of frame your argument. In my opinion, you should never be engaging with material without some idea of how you want to use it in your writing. So you'll always be writing alongside it. And that way, when you finish your research, you already have maybe a third to a half of a draft of something done with your thoughts on the page.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why professors ask students to create annotated bibliographies, to have that kind of dialogue between you, the writer, and whatever your source material is. But you're right, that's something that we should be doing all the time. And even informally, right? Even if it's just, you know, you have your notebook where you work on your papers, and just jotting down ideas as you go along. They don't need to be super well formed. They don't need to be perfect. You can always revise later. Most of writing is revision anyway, so you can always go back and clean it up and make it really shine. But constantly writing is a great way to just flex those muscles.
That totally ties into my last point, which is don't be too precious. There's not going to be a magical time to start writing. There's not going to be some aha moment where you feel like now you know everything and you can write it down. You know, writing is something that we've been doing for millennia, right? People did it by candlelight with quills or on cave walls and shit like that. It's not something that you need the fanciest notebook or the fanciest computer or the fanciest pen. It's not something that needs the best thought right now. It just needs to be done. to a lot of people in the world, writing is just a part of their job. It's a part of everyday life. And if you start treating it like that, as something that you just kind of have to do, start breaking away some of the mysticism around being a writer and just writing as you just go to the grocery store or just show up to class, it becomes 10 times easier.
Yeah, I think when people read about, you know, famous writers' routines, then you tend to get this idea that good writers have a particular routine, and so you need to establish that routine, and that's what's going to work. I think it's actually the other way around. Those writers, those routines only happened over time as they, you know, forced themselves to just sit down and write every day. It's not, the routine doesn't come before the writing comes before the routine. So if you just make writing less of a scary thing and more of something that you do a little bit of every day, tweak a few things, work on a few things every day, then the routine will come by itself. The routine will happen, and you'll be able to settle into your own traditions and what works for you.
Peter, you want to weigh in, or?
Agreed. I mean, I guess one thing to say would be that, you know, if you do find that your favorite author or writer has a routine, right? Like, it's likely that they're doing the same thing you were doing. They looked at whoever they admired, saw how they did it, and then tailored it to serve them. So, you know, there's no shame in copying the writing habits of someone else. But as Ellis was saying, you know, do make sure it serves you, right? You don't have to replicate it exactly. You do you.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we're kind of like looking at having to address is be adaptable. I mean, when we look at other people's stuff, we're talking about trying something new that works for you. Too often, people who consider themselves bad at writing are only really feel they're bad at writing because they keep on doing the same thing again and again and again. They keep on pushing a paper off until 2 o'clock in the morning and then speed writing it overnight. And yeah, you're going to have a bad time when you do that. If that's the only way that you've tried to write, you're going to think that writing's bad. But if you get up early in the morning and maybe start writing your ideas and then revise at night, maybe that'll change the whole experience for you. So kind of figuring out and experimenting with what works for you. Try writing in the morning, try writing at night. Try skipping your laptop altogether for the first draft and writing everything out by hand. Maybe you hate citation. Learn citation by hand so that it's in your memory.
Yeah, and this kind of brings us back to the first point that I was talking about, is it's just that you need to experiment a lot and figure out what works for you. You know, there's no one who can dictate or control your writing life except you. And you have the freedom to figure out what works best for your preferences, for your particular set of habits and skills, and you know what those are. And so as you know, people in charge of writing centers, we want to encourage our students to experiment and figure out what works best for you in terms of your writing life, and creating a writing space that really allows you to sit and write without stressing too much about anything else.
All right, I think that sounds lovely. I think that wraps us up for our top fives. We're going to have a couple links down below for you all, and have a lovely day. Bye.